I'm just here to listen.
Perfect. And hello, Dan, too, and hello, Shannon. It's amazing to see a lot of people, at least their face. I've never met you in person, but it's great to see you all here. So with that, we can get started. Welcome. So Kelly, you want to kick us off?
If I can find my unmute button, yes. So welcome everybody. Just a few reminders. If you could, well, any of the work group members, if you could type your name in the chat, that will count as attendance. Again, mute yourselves when not talking. You can use the chat box function when you have questions or raise your hand. And then this meeting is also being recorded and may be posted for the public. That's all I have.
So we'll move to introductions. If you could just, work group members, just whip around. We'll do it popcorn style, so jump in but not over anybody. Give your name, your affiliation. I know several of you have a number of different hats, organizations, so we'll take the most primary one for you for now. And then one thing you hope to contribute to this group. So I'll start off and lead by example. My name is Aaron Bass. I am CEO for Eastside Charter School. And one thing I hope to contribute is just a focus on students and being a practitioner in education. I look forward to sharing a lot of practical tools and examples as we move this work forward.
Hey, Chuck Longfellow here. I'm Aaron's co-chair, Chief Financial Officer, Christina School District. I hope to contribute lots of analogies that I hope work. We're going to talk about cake, right? We'll see how deep we can get into the cake, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to work with this group.
I'll jump in. Gary Henry, Dean of the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Delaware. And I guess the one thing that I would hope to contribute is to bring to bear some of the evidence about what's worked to achieve more equitable outcomes for students around the country as we're considering how to move forward here in Delaware.
Shannon Griffin, Safe Schools. Sorry, Dr. Rowley.
Go right ahead, Shannon.
Shannon Griffin, Safe Schools. I'm hoping to bring the importance of family community engagement perspective and how we can leverage that important resources to help to accelerate our student learning.
Fantastic. Nice to see you, Shannon. We'll be seeing each other all night tonight, won't we? Hi, everyone. Shelley Rouser, and I am the chairperson for education programs at Delaware State University. In thinking of one thing that stands to that's at the front of my mind is the role that Delaware State University can play in working with other IHEs as well to be a part of the solution with what is happening in teacher preparation programs, for that matter, administrator preparation programs, to just help the work that's underway. So anything that we can do to help with along those lines.
Hi, my name's Tika Hartsock. I am a Reading Consortium member. I also am on the Social Deterrence Committee and the Funding Committee, as well as representing parents within the Brandywine School District. And then I'm also the liaison between this group and CESPAC, as well as GACEC.
Dan Shelton, superintendent in the Christina School District. And I guess the one thing that I would hope to contribute is, although my entire teaching career was in the city of Wilmington and most of my career was in the Christina School District, I spent the last 5 years in Dover. And I would hope what I can contribute is that equity lens is a statewide lens and how potentially things that we can talk about can affect statewide.
folks. I'm Kristen Dwyer. I'm with DSEA, the Director of Legislation and Political Organizing. I hope, along with my counterpart, our President Stephanie Ingram, who, if you want to go next, Stephanie, jump in. We want to make sure that, you bring the lens, from our membership's perspective. We represent 13,000 educators statewide. Just to echo Dan Shelton's comments, it is a statewide issue, not necessarily pinpointed at one particular area within the state. But I hope that between Stephanie and I, we can give you some real life on the ground perspective as seen by our classroom and non-classroom educators.
Hi, my name is Rashawn Austin. I'm with the Office of Equity and Innovation. I work as an ed associate for the Department of Education now. I'm recently transferred into that work group. And I hope to be able to bring any knowledge and expertise around initiatives that are currently taking place at the department and in supporting the work of the work group with any recommendations related to current best practice research, as well as being able to share some of the strategies and work that is going on across the state. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of the work group.
Good evening. My name is Monique Martin, and I think what I may be able to contribute, I also represent the Delaware Department of Education, the Office of Equity and Innovation. What I believe I may be able to contribute is to actually observe, reflect, provide insights with strategic alignment and the fidelity of whatever implementation strategy to leverage and maximize a greater impact through an equity lens and social justice stance. Thank you for having me as a part of this.
And is that all members of the committee?
That is.
Perfect. So we'll get into it. Chuck.
All right, thanks. I'm working a computer here so I can see what the notes are, so I know which slides are mine at the same time as there's a cursor going here. So sorry about that. One thing that we wanted to work on, maybe get the group's input, and if it's good enough now, blessing on, is the work group scope. We felt, Aaron and I as the co-chairs, we felt that we really should take a look at what that scope is, since we're both members of the Funding and Governance Committee. We know that they have a couple lines of effort going on themselves. We want to be complementary to what they're doing and to what the consortium as a whole is doing. So we thought it might be good to try to nail down a scope for us. So this is what we came along with our partners from University of Delaware. And do we have a Delaware State University person helping us too, or is it just UD for our group? Just UD, right? IPA?
For right now, and Shelley when needed.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. This is what we came up with so far, that in response to the settlement group will be a watchdog for how the state and General Assembly implement the actions in the settlement. We want to make sure that the consortium is responding appropriately. So we'll do that through recommendations. We are a committee of the consortium, so we don't respond directly. We do it up through the consortium. So we have that protocol that we wish to follow. We, as a group, we are collectively intend to be a subject matter expert on the settlement for the Reading Consortium in the context of the consortium. And there's so many people here wear so many different hats. I think just by nature of this group, it's going to end up where we we're broader than just Newcastle County and Wilmington, but the Reading Consortium is focused on the upper part of the state. But, and more about that on the next slide. Also, we want to create recommendations for the General Assembly to proceed or implement the actions outlined in the settlement. And a lot of those are through the budget process, through the legislative process, and through our advocacy collectively as individuals, and most importantly, up through the consortium. Next slide, please. Okay, our goals. We want to offer guidance or influence when the General Assembly must make decisions related to the settlement. We want to challenge the state and General Assembly to use the settlement as a floor and push for further change. And you'll see some things that we as a group have outlined that that are in the settlement with time hacks on them. We want it earlier, and we want more. And we also want to influence the system as a whole, not just the settlement itself, but we want to influence the system. So, what we can do as our mighty little work group, we will do, and we can challenge the state to do more and do it earlier. And finally, and this is the statement that really speaks to more of a statewide, a statewide goal, is connecting the settlement to systemic and equitable change. So yes, we want to definitely change things for students in the city of Wilmington and students in Newcastle County, but it is statewide. Equity, as we implement it, it's got to be equitable for everyone, or else it's not equitable by definition. So this is one of the things. I'll take this opportunity to just talk about the icing in the cake real quick. And this is a discussion we've had a lot. The settlement itself, it's great. It's wonderful that we have it. We're going to do a lot of good things for kids with that. But when you compare it to a $1.6 billion statewide education spend, it's not a whole lot. The $1.6 billion is the cake, and we're getting some icing to make that cake taste better. The cake itself is the reason that we came to this point where we had a lawsuit and we had a settlement. So the system as it exists with the $1.6 billion, is there anything we can do to change that for the better? So that's the systemic part, the equitable part. So when we talk about the cake, we're talking about the existing system that's been going on for decades. The icing is the settlement. We're glad to have the icing. It tastes good, right? It looks good, but we want to do more than just that. Thanks for listening. Next slide. Is that me, or is that? Next slide is Kelly.
It is. So the co-chairs asked us to pull together just some previous attempts to address funding inequities in Delaware. This is not the first attempt. Hopefully it is one of the last. So just the next two slides show from 2006, when people have been starting and groups have been starting to address education funding inequities, from Vision 2015 to Race to the Top in 2011. West commissioned an Edunomics study in 2013. WEAC was started in 2014 and 15. And then 2015, the Senate Joint Resolution 4 commissions Education Funding Improvement Commission to review and make recommendations to modernize and improve Delaware's system for public education funding. It keeps on going, kind of starting to feel like Groundhog's Day in here and there. 2016, WEAC turns to WEIC to help implement WEAC's recommendations. Education Equity Delaware is founded in 2016. 2018, the funding lawsuit that we're here for. 2019, Governor Carney announces opportunity grants. 2019, there's a study commissioned with Ed Trust, and now here we are, now that there's a lawsuit. And I'm sure I missed a few things in there as well, but just kind of an overview of where we are.
Perfect. And so to give you guys a heads up, I'm going to just do an overview of just where we are, as well as discussing the settlement. And so today is just an introduction. We'll get a lot of feedback from you all, and at the end there will be a survey. Also want to talk to you about just what the settlement happens to be, and then we'll get into our next few meeting setups. So if you hit the next slide, Kelly. The settlement that Kelly has also sent out lots of information about the settlement, just to distill it down for everyone, even those who are watching and joining us today. Opportunity funding is going to grow from $25 million per year to $60 million per year by 2024 through 25 school year. If you're aware, opportunity funding has been something that's been in place under Carney's administration. And so this is an expanse of that over time. By 24-25, the amount will grow in accordance with the enrollment at schools serving English language learners and low-income students, which are two key areas for the settlement. 5 million of which will be reserved for mental health and reading supports in schools with the highest concentration of low-income and ELL students. There's also a focus from the settlement that was agreed to by our Governor Carney and by Secretary of Education for K-3 spec ed funding to continue to dedicated to basic spec ed students in kindergarten through third grade to equal funding currently in place for basic special education students in grades 4 to 12. Again, this is by fiscal year 24. Teacher recruitment and retention. And so noting that there is a need here, $4 million has been an annual commitment to support enhanced teacher recruitment and retention in high need schools beginning in the 2022 through 23 school year. And then early education is supposed to grow from 6.1 million to 12.2 million. This is the agreement that we're spending a lot of time looking at. The question you'll have in your survey by the end is the first part. One, while the governor has agreed to this settlement, this has not been agreed to by the legislature. So we get to have some conversation with legislature of one, is this even what you all should agree to? So there's argument, not proposing this, but we could say, no, we don't agree to this. It should be no money at all. We might want to state, well, we think this is a good floor. There should be more funding in place for this. We want everybody to have the same basic understanding of what's in place. Is also in the next slide, you'll see a focus on an ombudsperson adopted to assist individuals, students, and families in resolving disputes or complaints. And so we do know that with having so many people in the state of Delaware, there's still going to be some room for growth. And so having somebody, a group that's actually able to work with that. Capital projects, a school district seeking voter approval for capital construction and major renovations will be required to distribute an equity statement to explain how the capital project would impact equitable distribution of new and renovated buildings within the district. And then an independent assessment. The state will hire an independent organization to complete a holistic assessment of the Delaware public school finance system by January 2024, which shall consider funding levels, revenue mechanisms, equity, and efficiency. So just for understanding this, this is a long-term commitment we're looking at, and not just something that is a quick response we'll get out to the legislature or to the Writing Commission to then agree to or not and send on to the legislature this year. So this is actually something we're looking at for long-term, but wanted to make sure that this is a group that can actually be discussing that and actually have a lot of sway into that. Chuck is going to give you some more information about just how that complies over the course of the years and give you an agenda for that through 2025 and forth. Chuck.
All right. First, want you to, I'd like Kelly to go through, she's got a chart here that the Institute for Public Administration put together. I love this chart because it breaks it down in a nice format where I can see when everything is supposed to be in place by. What she's done is she's put each major element of the settlement as we understand it. And if anybody understands differently, we definitely want to know that. We want to all be on the same page, along with which fiscal year these are supposed to be in place. So Kelly, would you like to go over the next couple, and then I'll go into a little further detail on the timeline?
Absolutely. As Chuck mentioned, this is a draft that we pulled together to see visually where things fall, when they need to occur by, and things like that. So if you have any edits or changes, please feel free to send them to me or mention them on here. I hope to make this into a one-pager for everybody to have and use. So just talking through, I know many of you know what's happening with the funding, with opportunity funding currently. Sorry, I was reading a text, message too. I will email this out to everybody as well. We have opportunity funding. It's at 75 million over 3 years right now. By fiscal year 22, there needs to be an increase, no less than 35 million, and shall provide 5 million of this for the mental health or reading supports of schools with high concentrations of low income and English learner students. And then legislation to make this permanent and require the LEAs to provide an annual report in fiscal year 23. Again, the next year funding should increase funding not less than 35 million. Again, 5 million is part of the mental health and reading supports. And then we keep increasing to 50 million for the year 24, fiscal year 24. And then again in fiscal year 25. And in fiscal year 25, it talks a bit more about, it talks a bit more about how that should be determined. Then one of the next points we talked about was K-3 basic special education. There's nothing in place right now. But by fiscal year 24, proposed legislation via budget epilogue to change the funding structure to be the same as the funding structure for basic special education in grades 4 to 12. And there was so much, I was trying to make it a little better to read, but sorry if you can't, I will send it. Talk about the Early Childhood Assistant Program, ECAP. It's currently funded at 6.1 million. Agreement was to have ECAP doubled to 12.2 million come fiscal year 24. Teacher recruitment and retention. They talked about the fiscal year 21 loan forgiveness and scholarship grants, and then adding in fiscal year 23 an additional 4 million to help recruit and retain teachers in high needs areas and schools for the next 3 fiscal years. We mentioned the ombudsperson that should be created and funded this fiscal year or for fiscal year 22. So that should be done this legislative session. And there'll be one in each county. There was also mention of the equity statement for capital projects, which is not in place right now, but there's no date specified. It's just that the department shall require it. And then the independent funding assessment needs to be completed by January 24. But then it mentions in prior fiscal years that we should include sufficient funding to do that. So that is kind of in a nutshell of where we are.
All right, next slide. So what we'll do is this is a further detail of what you just saw. Everything that's highlighted in blue are things that are supposed to happen next fiscal year. So if I read the settlement correctly, the governor the governor is supposed to put in his recommended budget these things, and then we hope that they would be implemented by the General Assembly, actually even possibly enhanced by the General Assembly or accelerated by the General Assembly with the concurrence of the governor. We'll see how that all works out, especially when we're hearing things about our economic state here in the nation. But so what we'll do is we'll go through these, and these are the things, these are what we need to look for in the budget that's coming up for the state. So opportunity funding needs to be increased to not less than $35 million for the next school year. And we expect to see language in there that ensures that 5 million of these funds will be reserved for mental health and reading supports with highest concentrations of low income and EL students. Next slide. And this is just future years. So we'll keep these, we'll keep this text here, and every year we'll move through these and make sure everything gets included. Next slide, please. So K-3 special education funding. This is the K-3 basic funding. There is some funding in the Student Success Block Grant currently, but we're looking through the settlement for it to be increased. There's no provision for anything to be added in this next fiscal year, but I know that there are many of us who certainly hope to see, you know, if some money is found to help accelerate the plan to work on this part here. Next, please. Teacher recruitment and retention. Also with this, there's not anything that is per settlement to be added in fiscal year 2022. That's the next budget that we're going to see. But again, anything that can be accelerated, we appreciate. Next. Early education. Here's also another one where currently it's funded at ECAP is funded at 6.1 million a year. It is supposed to go up to 12.2 million in the fiscal years you see here. There's not really any provision for this to escalate each year, but I certainly hope that we're not looking at just keeping it level and getting to 12.2 when it's required. I hope that we can add money between now and then if that's something that we can do. Next. Here's some more. So here's blue, ombudsperson. The settlement calls for 1 per county effective fiscal year 2022. Next. Capital projects, there's supposed to be an equity statement. We noted that there was no time constraint or recommendation on this. So I'm not sure what the intent was for when this should be handled, but it is something we'll watch to see how it does get implemented. Next. And the independent assessment of the Delaware Public School System. That is to be completed by January 2024. So that is something that we don't know whether we'll see it in the fiscal year 2022 budget or not, but it is something that it's not something you can complete in a 1-month time period. So I would expect that we might see some kind of lead up work for this. Next. All right, is this still me?
No, but we'd like to, we're throwing a lot of information out there. I'm also seeing some great things in the chat. And so just for clarification, what Shannon had put out there, yes, this is for the ombudsperson. It's not a one person, but it is to have a group that can actually be involved. Right now, it's not selected. And so it could be one person, which I don't think one person could solve all the problems that could come out of Delaware. But that it's also, and it could be a group. And so there needs to be guidance for that. And then I also wanted to just pause and ask, with all the emails you've gotten from Kelly, and who's been really great at putting PowerPoints together and also sharing information, are there any questions about the information that's been agreed to in the settlement from the governor, from committee members? And or statements from committee members as well. I also believe in wait time. Perfect.
Aaron?
Yep.
This is Gary Henry. I'll just offer one. A faculty member in the college and I did a little research on state finance reforms across the country. And when the reform objectives are all met here in Delaware, trying to do an apples to apples, that will represent about 1.4% of the annual education budget for total K-12 revenues. Across the country, the best we can figure is that, calculate is that these reforms amount to about 6% on average. And we do see a positive effect on more equitable outcomes and greater equity across the US. But I think one of the points that Chuck and you were making earlier is that we hope that this is a floor and not the maximum that we reach, and these figures would suggest that we may. I mean, the settlement's great. It's greatly appreciated, and it's a lot of money. But whether it's enough to move the needle compared to what some of the other states have achieved through their reforms, I think is an open question.
Agreed. And then when we get into our future meetings, the layout for the day is supposed to just be more of a, hey, here's what the settlement is. Our future meetings, we're going to start having people come in. We already have somebody for our next February meeting. We would love to have different groups, especially yours, Dr. Henry, as a committee member, to share what are the best practices. Because the goal of this group, as we shared earlier, is that we're able to provide great guidance. And people are looking to us to be a resource. So there are actually people in the Writing Commission who are looking to us as a resource, and even the legislature, as well as many of the groups working on this. And so we definitely want to get that research. And I actually have the information you share with me, Dr. Henry, that'll be in some of the future meetings as well.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank
Aaron,
you.
will the scope of our work go beyond just allocating, buckets within these various areas to actually identifying the kind of quality criteria for the work that carries out from them? Will it go that far?
Oh, Shelley. Kelly, can you go back to the scope? You can go back to that slide. All that to say, Shelley, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure when I'm looking at the scope, the recommendations, yes. Yes, I just, I'm talking about the grain level, the grain level of where we'll go in terms of the quality, because it is about the execution and implementation and all of those things.
Yep. And Chuck talked about the cake and the icing earlier.
Yes.
What we want to make sure is that one, we're not just providing a lot of icing is the fluff. It's a lot of the nice extra stuff on top. And two, one key thing is that we're not removing the cake. And sometimes it is that we see not this, and we think that everyone involved has great intentions. In other places, in other states outside of Delaware, where they're not as wonderful as we are in this state, people have increased funding in certain areas, the icing, if you will, but then decrease the cake. And so in the end, it's net zero, and there's nothing happening for the children. The other piece is what Tika put is the devil in the details. We want to make sure that the outcome here, the recommendations we put forth are is useful. If people walk away from this and we pat ourselves on the back and the legislature pats themselves on the back, and there's not one change in Wilmington, there's not one change for low income students who are low income, students who are ELL, and students who are in K-3 special education, are students that have the highest need, we have wasted our time. We definitely want to focus on that and actually asking everyone to hold us accountable as a committee, that we're not trying to be cute. My words, not yours, but.
So another part of the settlement too is that it does leverage an already existing funding mechanism in a way. The Opportunity Fund, the Governor and General Assembly have, it's been a few years now since they started the Opportunity Fund. And I know that there's a study that the state's doing through RAND that we should be receiving that any week now, I think. Now COVID, of course, put a crimp in the way that they could evaluate the effectiveness of what people are doing with Opportunity Fund. But since the settlement extends the Opportunity Fund, it'd be great to see what the outcome, what the conclusions of that RAND study are. It might be something for us to talk about, because I think, Shelley, maybe what you, and I see a couple things in the chat, or might be getting at is, how do we know this is effective? And how do we know, how do we do things with this money that are effective? And, we need best practices. And we don't just need money. We need to know that we're doing the right stuff with the money. So hopefully that RAND study will come soon, and we'll have maybe some other things that we could use to help us with best practice. I saw in the chat, Shannon just said she agrees with Dr. Rouser that funding should be tied to outcomes. Well, really, outcomes should come from the implementation of the funding. I don't want to say that because somebody didn't get an outcome, desired outcome, I'm going to stop giving them money. That we've had that model before in the state too, with several grants. But how can we also get not just the money, but the technical assistance that's needed to implement it in a way that makes a difference?
Also see in the chat, will the best practices go along with the increase in will best practices on protocols be implemented along with resource and increases? And again, that is the hope. That's what we want to do from this, is see that there are best practices and not just funding for funding's sake. So we want to make sure that the legislature, as they approve these things, it moves forward in a way that it's tied to that. I also wanted to give some nuance here, and this is something I learned along this process. The legislature is going to approve the budget annually. The settlement is not being approved at once. So what this means for us is that year one of the settlement, the governor is putting out his budget, and the legislature will approve a budget by June 30th and on time in a wonderful way. With that being said, there is the possibility that 3 years from now, the legislature could look at the budget and say, we don't agree. We want to make all these different changes. What's in place right now for the settlement is that what has been agreed to is that if we continue in this certain way, what the governor and Secretary Bunting had signed off on, then the lawsuit is where it stands. It's not moving forward. If the settlement is not agreed to in subsequent years, that could mean the lawsuit can continue on. So just for clarity, the legislature's not saying, yes, we agree with this on pick a date. They must continue to approve this and approve the budget every year that meets these criteria. With that being said, we still want to make sure that, one, the question we put out is this a floor or is this a max? And from talking to a lot of people in this group, I would assume that this is something that is a great floor for people, and that we want to do what's in the best interest of children. And then also looking at how we make sure that these are best practices along with it, so we don't just throw money at a situation without having increases. Kelly, if you will, I wanted to get to slide 20, and then we'll do a few more, get through some more of the slides, do some more Q&A just about the settlement today, and then we'll get into public comment.
And this is me. We just took parts of the settlement and aligned them with the recommendations that were released by the consortium for this current fiscal year, for fiscal year 22. You can see there's some alignment from our educator work group with the teacher recruitment and retention piece. They recommended a Grow Our Own program and a whole school professional learning program. And then the social determinants work group recommended the K-3 special education funding for fiscal year 22, and then proposed enhanced ECAP funding. So these are just some higher level areas where we align. The full recommendations are on our website if you'd like to review, and we will be digging deeper into some of them at future meetings.
With this slide, we also wanted to talk about that we acknowledge the great work, and some of us are actually in other committees for the Writing Commission. So we want to work with and not step over the work that people are doing for our different groups. And so we'll be having members of those committees also be invited and come out to future meetings. If you could hit the next slide. We're going to get in some conversation tonight. Would love to just hear more information, but also I'm someone that realizes that sometimes I need to reflect on information that I've received. I also to make sure that we're hearing from everybody. So Kelly, at the end of the meeting, will be sending out a survey to all of our committee members. That's important because we want to make sure that louder voices aren't the only voices that are heard. And also, if you need to take some time and reflect, that you have that as well. We want to be sharing that information as we move forward. The end goal is to develop proposals. And so we want to make sure that as we're coming up with our proposals for this settlement group, that it's something that can be used in the legislature, and also make sure that it's being used effectively for the students. And then remember that we're doing this for the kids. And so the unofficial title I've been using is to get over yourself. And so as plain as I can put it, and this is just from Aaron, but there are this group is an incredible, diverse group that has many different people involved. And so I appreciate all of you. And we also have different vested interests in the work that we do. For this group, I'm asking people, and this is just asking from me, that we focus on the students that are directly impacted by the settlement. And so that means that I know that I happen to be somebody who's from a charter background, and for these meetings, I could care less about being chartered. I know that Chuck is somebody who works within the district schools, and that's great. And our conversations have had nothing to do with district versus charter. They have nothing to do with our vested interests. And so for our groups, if we are focusing on our students and focusing on making a change, and what Shelley put into the comments, return on investment, yeah, the work that we do has to make an impact 20 years from today. Lots of money has been wasted in many different states, and this is a great opportunity to start making some change. And I think it's a great floor, but it'll take all of us to get over just our own different beliefs and try to figure out what's in the best interest of children. So that's just my soapbox. And then we'll jump into this next slide for future meetings, talk about what we'll be doing. So our future meetings, yep. I'll let you take it from there, Kelly.
So just our future meetings, we're going to meet about every 3 weeks. They're up here on the slide. I'm not going to read them all to you. I will also send this out to the work group members in the meeting after this. Aaron, there was a question from Larissa that if Dwayne's still on, maybe he could help answer. I know he had to sign off. He's still here. Good. Is there a point where not approving the annual funding runs out the clock on the suit, so it would be possible to end up again where we are now?
So the timeline, as you described it tonight, going through fiscal year 2025 is protected in the settlement agreement such that there is $1 million attorney fee award penalty against the state to allow the suit to continue at that point. After January 21st of 2025, however, if the state decided there were no more opportunity funds or any other of the components of the agreement, the state could do that. Whether that would raise claims of a constitutional violation would be a question to be determined by litigators at that point. Call me maybe.
And Dwayne, can you just introduce yourself to everybody too?
Yeah, hi, Dwayne Bensing, ACLU of Delaware.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? And we're going to have conversation tonight about the scope, the goals, and even asking you, do you think that the settlement should be accepted? That'll be in the survey. We can also discuss those things right now as well. So open floor for working for our committee members. And Dan, if you want to comment about the unit count, this is a conversation that we are talking about for the future. This is not one that we're going to write a proposal tonight, but there is possibly some changes that could take place within the unit count.
Yeah, I before Dwayne answered, I started that. I hadn't quite finished it before he started, but thank you. That was a good explanation, Dwayne. But I think if we end up doing this as an opportunity fund, write in an epilogue, then yeah, it could just disappear in the switch of a legislator. If we get it embedded in code and we get it embedded in the way we do business and modernize our formula to take into account the people that the ACLU was trying to fight for in the first place. By the way, something it shouldn't have taken that for us to have fixed on our own. We've been talking about it for too long. If we can get it embedded, I say this all the time, and there's probably everybody on this call has heard me say this, right? So funding streams, little lines of funding disappear. The legislature has never touched the unit count. That always gets fully funded. So as long as we have it in the formulaic way we fund our schools, then that funding's not going to go anywhere.
Thank you. And it's interesting having conversations with all of our committee members, Chuck and I. it seems consensus amongst this group at least is that yes, the unit count is not adequate for what we need. And the larger question is now, what do we do? And so over the course of the next, by May, we're hoping that all of you have an answer so we can share that with Matt and with Tizzy who are on today. By the way, also what Kelly added into the slides, the reason one that she went through the slides and talked about Groundhog's Day was because I'm just show you there's a number of different iterations that have happened before. And as Dan mentioned, they've gone away, one. And then two, by 2024, there is a look at the funding. Part of the conversation for this group of recommendations could be maybe 2024 might be too far away. And also what are some possible suggestions for a unit count as opposed to waiting to that time. So again, this is the floor. The recommendations around the funding and recommendations around the timing are the floor. We can accelerate, we can advise, suggest to increase the funding and also accelerate some of the timeline. But the base level what Dwayne is talking about is that these thresholds must be met by this certain time. There's no penalty for going above or moving faster for anybody involved. Seen a couple things in the chat too. And you can also, committee members can speak, or you can also add to the chat as well. So group the unit count. Yep, conversation about getting the code. Thank you, Shannon. Yep. Yep. Perfect.
So I'll go ahead and start then. And this is just a general comment. So we do have some people who love the unit count, the stability and the concept that the General Assembly has and the governor have not taken funding away from the unit count that we know of in recent years. So, but they have taken flexible funding away when times get tough. So, and then you have others who say, blow up the unit count, let's go to just a cash system and so forth. But, you know, either way you think, just my personal sense, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but my personal sense is that the unit count itself will probably not go away. If there's a political appetite to blow it up and start all over, that's one thing. But if it's going to stay here, are there things that we can do to modify it, to enhance it, so that it does give better equity, especially to the students that we're talking about, students from low income families, English learners. Are we sure that it's equitable for special ed students? So, you know, that's just something I want to put out there. I'm not saying one way or the other. As somebody who has operated within the unit count for a while, I'm personally comfortable with it. I can make it do what I need it to do. But I can see, having been inside of this for a while, that there are some ways that I think that I'll bring to future meetings that we might be able to enhance the current unit count to increase equity. So I know that that'll be a conversation. This conversation itself on unit count, keep it or toss it, is probably, you could probably have 3 hours worth of comment on that subject alone. So I'll start by throwing that first thing out, and maybe I baited somebody to say the next thing.
First it is.
Hi, Chuck. You baited me, which shouldn't be surprising. My name's Kristen. For those of you who don't know me, Kristen Dwyer with the Delaware State Education Association. In these committees, I'm always used to introducing myself and my organization before I begin talking, so you have to forgive me. I worked with Chuck and several other folks on this committee for at least as long as I've been with DSEA regarding education funding, always trying to figure out how we can add more money into it, protect the money that we have, or rearrange the rules that surround how we spend our money. I would agree with Chuck in that we've got a good foundation in our system, in that if you have the kids, you're going to get the money, and the legislature has not touched that even in times of a budget shortfall, significant budget shortfalls. Whereas in other states, you see them immediately going after those education funds. But the system is over 60 years old, and it's predicated on a broken system as well. So what I would hope that we can come to consensus on is a way to enhance the unit funding system, put guardrails in place that keep it from being a 60-year-old system that has never been changed, to give us the system we need for the time that we live in. One state that I often look at is Maryland and their Kirwan Commission. Because of a funding lawsuit, they had to, every 10 years, meet back up and discuss what their goals are, what their mandates have been, and what the need is, and make sure their system aligns to each of those three things. That's something that Delaware doesn't have, even though education's 1/3 of the budget and it's billions of taxpayer dollars. I would hope that we never run into this situation again, because we'll have a systematic way to review how we spend our money in Delaware. You know, I'm not here to say that I'm a lover or a hater of the unit funding system. I always think things can be enhanced, can be improved. And that's why I'm here. I want to talk about how we can make it stronger and protect those services, whether it's instructional or otherwise, that we know make the biggest impact on our kids' lives.
And Kristen, you're jumping into the work we definitely want to do, which is and share more resources like that. Right now, there's nothing after 2025, as Dwayne also put into the comments about the $1 million penalty. There's nothing for 2035, 2055, 2100 to look at how we re-examine this on a certain basis. So part of the structure we're looking at is maybe we need to put in stops every blank many years to look at how we align with how we're performing and what needs to be changed. So definitely want to encourage, if you have other resources. I know Dr. Henry has shared, Gary shared a couple. I know a few others have just sent some emails. We'll be sharing that out with the group. So if you have any, definitely please send them. Love to have some great, wonderful, healthy conversation in this group, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the kids, and that hopefully we decrease the amount of students who are living in poverty in Delaware. That is if we can make sure that never happens again. One, we've done something amazing, also a model for other places, but two, also making sure that we're able to do what's in the best interest for return on investment, because money without leadership is nothing. Anybody else?
I saw a comment from Shannon Griffin using one of my favorite quotes about the definition of insanity, about the unit count. So I know we have at least one, potentially one person on here who's thought is, hey, look, there's a better system out there. So definitely I'd like to, this could be a forum to hear some of the ideas, so that, we do consider all approaches to making the cake more equitable, not just letting the icing do the job. So it might, maybe if not tonight, some other night we could talk about that.
Shannon, can you just share with the West funding?
Yeah, so Kelly actually mentioned this on the outset of the meeting when we talked about all the different funding initiatives or reform funding initiatives that went along. So in 2013, West did commission a study, an independent study of funding structures across the country. I guess it's like generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, different ways that that funding could be structured. So that work has been vetted, and I'm happy to just be sending it around again to folks who may not have been on the scene in 2013 or forgot what all was in it.
That'd be great. Yeah, if we could get a link or email with that information in it, that would be that'd be great.
Will do.
And then, does anybody have any questions about our scope? So we've got recommendations. That was a comment earlier from Shelley. Is there anybody else who'd like to say, you know what, we should think about this for our scope, because we want to be tunnel vision on that scope as we move forward the next few months, and hopefully longer than that?
I like to see us focus on or have recommendations around really being, I guess, make sure this funding is really targeted. I know, Aaron, you mentioned that we want to make sure that the money actually goes to the student, that we student focused, right? But we know that some of our kids are significantly behind, right? So even before we even talk about the learning loss with COVID. So I think there needs to be, in my opinion, some kind of provision or something that says that there needs to be a focus on whatever plans come out or whatever that actually focuses on how we're going to accelerate the students who we know are 2, 3, 4 years behind, academically. So not to say how schools have to do it, but that we want to see a specific focus on how they expect to get it done.
Just for follow-up, is that another bullet, or is that enhancing what's written for bullet 2 and bullet 4?
Yeah, I see that as an enhancement. I mean, I'm happy to take pushback, but I just really think that it's important. And because when we talk about the funding, yes, it's going to ELL students, and yes, it's going to students, in poverty. But we know that those students, I don't know. I just think that we need to really be, and if we don't have a separate bullet for it, that it be always at the forefront of our mind in how we expect the funding to really be tailored and used. So not just because kids are poor that they're behind, but those kids who are behind definitely need, some specific support.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. One thing we're looking at is starting even conversations around what does it look like when this works well? And does it mean, and I'm using arbitrary numbers, not what we need to decide as a group, but does it mean that every child is performing at grade level on SBAC? Does it mean that every child is performing on grade level at pick whatever? Does it mean the graduation rate for students who are of lower income is matching those of the highest economic quintile? Starting to think with the end in mind is also a great healthy push, because I agree with you. It's not just the fact that you want to see now there's, all right, everybody got more money in this certain tranche. Tell me, what does that mean for when it works well? So I fully agree with you. Kristen?
Aaron, I want to just jump off of Shannon's comments. A lot of talk there was a time in Delaware where money was tied to accountability. And then we luckily went through a phase where the federal government passed ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. And during that time, states were then commissioned to review their own school accountability and revise it, and actually without a whole lot of federal pressure and requirements and restrictions. During that time, our national affiliate, the National Education Association, took the time to put together something called the Opportunity Dashboard. And what it was were lists of things that state affiliates could use in the conversation regarding accountability. And what it was based off of was similar to what you were saying. The students that are in the highest quintile of income, the ones that have access to the best schools that the state can provide, whether private or public, charter, whatever. What is it that they have at their fingertips, those educators, those students in a school setting, and use that list of things to judge whether or not your school is providing what all these other kids are getting in order to support their needs within the school building, not taking into account what's going on outside the building. But within that opportunity dashboard were other student support services that could help, with the trauma, with the food insecurities, the community instability, whatever it may be. And what I'd like to do is actually share that document with this group, because, when I think of outcomes, I think success is different for every single student, right? It doesn't look the same for every single one. But and that's why I'm not the biggest fan of standardized tests and whatnot, but because student success absolutely looks different for every single student. But this opportunity dashboard absolutely took what it takes to get a student from A to B, especially those students that are the furthest behind.
Thank you. And if you can put that either in the chat or email to Kelly, because we're also compiling lists of different recommendations and ideas, and also other state funding for some future meetings as well, as we start to figure out what does this look like. Thanks, Dwayne. And Kelly, thank you for putting that in there. By the way, I also want to remind everybody that in your survey, please do the survey, but also these are the questions we're looking at. And so if you have other ideas after this, put them all in. We really want to focus on how do we make sure that our kids are successful, especially students that are named in this settlement. If there's not additional comments, again, tonight was to get into the settlement and give you just, here's like the broad stroke for everybody. Our future meetings, starting off February 8th, are going to start digging into, so what are some of the other pieces out there we should be looking at? And so Gary talked about the 1.4% versus 6%. What does that look like? Kristen started sharing ideas about when we're actually looking at success in the future and what does success look like? How does that look and what do we do? And even if you have other ideas around the scope, definitely share that in the survey. Call either Chuck, myself, or Kelly up. This is literally no person's name on the group. It's about the committee and also us walking away from here, doing everything possible to make sure that our children have a better future. With that, if we've already gone over the dates, which Kelly, you shared, I'll let you jump into the public comment. And we'll also be sending you the dates for future meetings as well.
If you wanted to do a public comment, please put it into the chat. I saw that Dawn has public comment. I'm going to try to limit it to 3 minutes per person. Go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you, Kelly. I ask all of you to look at the recommendations that the Social Determinants of Health work group compiled, specifically the early childhood comments, the early childhood recommendations, pardon me, regarding increasing ECAP, because the doubling what we currently have, and I have a ton of information on this, I'm happy to share it with the group, but when we look at how we have funded ECAP over the past 25 years and how we have funded K-12, we see the trajectory, we see the growth in K-12 funding, but the ECAP funding has stayed stagnant, right around $6,000, $7,000 per child per year. So we really, really are far behind the per child funding, as well as the number of children who we're funding. So we need to increase the per child funding as well as the number of children who are participating. Additionally, increasing the quality, because the funding has been so low, we've been unable to go to full day. We've been unable to require certified teachers. So in school districts, the teachers are certified, but in a lot of our early childhood partner programs, they're unable to afford a certified teacher. And we understand that it's because the funding is so low. So increasing the funding, the per child funding, would allow programs to have a certified teacher in those roles, and offering before and after care. And then also looking at the preschool unit funding. So right now, preschool unit is 12.8 children per teacher. And any of you who've worked with 3-year-olds with special needs, you know that that just doesn't work. It doesn't meet the Office of Child Care licensing ratio, nor does it meet the Delaware STARS ratio. So it truly is an antiquated system for the preschool ratio. And we don't receive any funding for our typical peers. So with all that said, I ask that this work group consider those two plus other ones that I will share as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Haley, for also putting the recommendations in the chat as well.
Next, we have Amy Solomon.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, brilliant. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I enjoyed listening tonight to everyone's comments. And I'm glad to go after Dawn because I had a chance to hear her speak about all this knowledge that she has down to science of how you can really reach these kids in the early years. And I would like to suggest that you could get a videographer for some of your resource specialists to make really, easy to digest short videos for General Assembly members to really fully understand what the recommendations are. Because when you read the bullet points all together for, especially early childhood, it's really hard to, if you don't have that in-depth knowledge, to picture how it all goes together. And my questions in the chat about, how are you going to get that implementation to the students, through the superintendents, through the principals, through the teachers, through the school boards, into the classroom. I think, showing them with little sound bites with your resource experts might be a way to get that outcome that you want. And maybe I'm approaching my 3 minutes, but I just finished my school board playbook guide and I'm just in the editing phase, but it was just really disturbing. I tried to get down to the ratios of students, especially, the biggest gap that you see is between Black and white students. So you see what that ratio is in the total student population, and then you see how success is met, by these proficiency standards that we're going by. And that's why I asked what data Reading is currently using as a group to base, what are the outcomes in Delaware that we're getting now? Because all I have access to are the DOE report cards. And I'm a little nauseous when I'm speaking now about what I found, and it's quite emotional. So, and this is just out in plain sight. So I think getting this money to those kids, and I think that's what I heard Shannon getting at, the kids that are already behind, significantly behind, need to have the money get to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And next up, we have Daniel Walker.
Good evening, and I hope you all can hear me. It's saying I have low bandwidth. My name is Daniel Walker, and I am the Chief of Staff for Wilmington City Council. I'm joining tonight, just to express some of the opinions of council members who are so appreciative of the settlement and the work that is going to allow our schools in the city to do on behalf of students. The first thing is we hear a lot of conversation around how Wilmington students are impacted by matters outside of the education space, which is true. We also hear a lot of conversation around how Wilmington students are encountering tons of trials and tribulations within their schools, which is true, especially now, given the exacerbated impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Two things that we think are important moving forward for the education space. I did share them earlier on a delegation call we were on. One, council members believe that Wilmington should have Wilmington-specific education ombudspersons who are able to work and understand the local context and influence. The other important piece of information is that Wilmington members believe it is crucial that the flexibility provided to school leaders in the settlement is also provided to school leaders within the base $1.6 billion that we spend on education. The funding system, as we see it now, is antiquated, over 70 years old, and doesn't provide for school leaders to make and react to the drastic decisions needed to meet the needs of their school community. We do not intend to know the will of the General Assembly. All that Wilmington City Council believes is that It is vital that we put students first, and sometimes that means making adults uncomfortable. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else from the public that would like to make comment?
Perfect. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for members of the public that also came, and also thank you for other members of the Reading Commission for joining us tonight, as well as our chairs, Matt Din and Tizzy Lockman. With that, we're going to send you all of the next meetings, as well as the survey. We look forward to sharing also results of the survey with this group in the future. And so we look forward to our future meetings. Again, if you have any other ideas, please share them either in the survey or email us directly, because we want to make sure that we are exhausting every possible idea to give forth some great proposals. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Have a good
you.
evening. Thank
night.
you.
Night.